People who've been kidnapped, how did you survive? I was kidnapped in my car when I was 18. I had been stalked by the guy for at least a few days, saw the same truck follow me a couple times on my way to college campus. I was just about to get out of my car to go to a bookstore, and this guy jumps in the passenger seat with a gun. He made me drive out of town to a remote area where his truck was parked. Never found out how he followed me to bookstore without the truck. He wanted to keep the gun on me while he got out of the car because I had a mace thing on my keychain. As he was backing out, he slipped and lost his footing, and I took off in the car. I drove straight to the police station. He was never caught. Almost. Age of 11. Do not go to second location. Fight like hell to stay in the first. Even if you get taken anyway, raising a huge noise can cause a witness to come see what's happening to you. And they can report it. I was on my way home from school for lunch and some guy in a small quarter-ton truck gets out, claims he's a police officer and tells me to get in the truck. Right away I'm thinking I'm not going anywhere with this clown. He claimed to be a cop and I asked, "Where's your badge?" While he's launching into this rant about how much trouble I'd be in if I don't do as he says in my head, I'm thinking all we have to do is bolt behind the house right next to us. That neighborhood had a whole mess of pathways that went all over the place. If we make it to that, there's no way that guy is gonna catch us. One straight up told him, "I'm not going anywhere with you." That caught him off guard, like he wasn't used to someone challenging him. He got this scared look on his face and got back in his truck. Then he tries laying this bullshit on us, he's some secret undercover cop and don't tell anyone he's there. Yeah right, my friend and I, we both ran home and told our parents. First thing, they called the cops and we gave a full description of both the truck and the guy. The friend who was with me actually remembered the license plate. After that I couldn't tell you what happened. We never got an update from the police and never saw that guy ever again. I got very, very lucky. The two men who kidnapped me from a bus stop, I was 16, had clearly done so with others before. They'd removed the door handles from the back seat doors, so when I tried to make my way out at a red light I couldn't get the door open. I'm pretty sure they intended to kill me after they raped me. They drove me to an abandoned gas station and began assaulting me, but about an hour into the experience a police car drove up to check out what was happening. The man in the back seat with me at that time threatened to slit my throat if I screamed, while his partner got out and convinced the cop that I was his niece, and that he and my dad brought me out to talk to me. He said they needed to set me straight because I'd been acting out. The cop insisted they leave the station right then, and he followed our car back to the highway. They got so worried he'd remember them if my body turned up the next day that they decided to release me right then. I got thrown down a gravel embankment along the highway, and ran in the dark to a nearby open restaurant. One will never forget lying there in the wet grass after coming to rest at the bottom of the embankment, gazing up at a sky filled with stars, and realizing that, holy shit, I was somehow still alive. Injured and anguished and violated and sorrowful. But alive and able to find a way through the trauma. I was very, very lucky. I was kidnapped way before my memories formed, so this is all from my parents and the police report. Basically, a lady in the nursing ward decided to give me a spicy adoption by hiding me in some sheets and taking me out of the hospital. She was tracked down a few days later and I was handed back to my parents. She didn't mistreat me. Apparently I was a healthy, normal child, and she even bought the expensive stuff in order to take care of me. I got to meet her in my teens. I asked her, why me? And it was because my family hadn't done the paperwork for me correctly, so I was easier to slip out and potentially give her more time to disappear with me. If you got more questions, feel free to reply to the message and I'll answer 'em. Edit. Forgot to mention, this was in 1998. I got to meet her when I was 17 in 2015. I was kidnapped when I was 7. It was by a very drug-ridden family member who told me he was bringing me out for ice cream. He left me on a bench outside of a bar when the bartender told him he couldn't bring kids in. It was a dirty biker bar in Las Vegas during the 90s. I was young, scared and didn't fully comprehend the situation. I was confused why we didn't go to an ice cream shop. The family member came out with two men that fully fucking terrified me. One of them touched my curly bright red hair and smiled wide. I remember not knowing what to do, so I started singing Joan Osborne's "What If God Was One of Us." They got freaked when I wouldn't stop singing and walked back in the bar. I was definitely a weird kid, but singing as self-defense was kind of smart. I was left alone on the bench again when a man walked up and asked me where my parents were. I told him I didn't get ice cream and wanted to go back to my mom, but my family member wouldn't let me. He walked in the bar but came out just a minute later and sat with me until the police arrived. 20 years later, my mom saw that family member for the first time. He was on end-of-life hospice care but made it to another family member's funeral. When everyone was filtering out, he was waiting on the bus home when my mom punched him in the face. I love my mom. I was kidnapped at gunpoint along with my younger brother and my early 20s mother when I was in kindergarten. My father, approximately 40 years old, hadn't taken the divorce well and already had some psychiatric illness, so he forced us all into his truck and drove us from California to Mexico. At the time, my parents told us kids that we were taking a family trip. I remember the drive, shopping in a street market, and being greeted by the flashing lights of police cars when we eventually returned to the States. The police were nice and let us sit in the police car. I remember being excited about that. The next thing I remember was coming home to dead pets, I think just 2 mice, but still. Then being upset that I had missed picture day in school when I saw the other kids receiving their photos. I'm not sure how long we were in Mexico, but maybe that'll help set the time frame. I'm not sure what would have happened if my father hadn't decided to take us back. I wasn't in a dangerous situation, so IDK if this counts. I believe I was around 5. My dad was divorcing my mom, who was a raging alcoholic, compulsive liar and very mentally ill. So one day she took me to this large home where different women with kids stayed at. I believe it was in some kind of park or forest. I remember I asked my mom if Daddy would join us, or if he knew we would be gone. Of course she lied and said, yes he knows, and he doesn't mind. I have no idea how long we stayed there. I don't remember if it was fun or not. But one day my grandma, on my mom's side, came and took me back to my father. I remember I was crying a lot because I wanted to stay with mom. My grandma didn't dare to get confronted by my dad, so she dropped me off and sped off. I remember the look in my dad's eyes as I just knocked on the door and he saw me just being there. I don't remember what happened after, honestly. But it's still an odd story. A friend of mine was kidnapped on his paper route. The robbers wanted his van to commit a robbery. They handcuffed him and put a bag over his head and left him in the back of the van through the robbery. When they were done, they told him to count to 100 before he got up and took off the mask. Pretty crazy. My grandmother's brother was kidnapped and held for ransom. He's a successful businessman, was held at gunpoint in the parking lot of his office building. Was in the papers and everything, and the photo they used coincidentally had my dad in the background. His claim to fame. It was a month before the kidnappers even made contact with the family to make their demands. These guys were pros. They've done this before and did their research. They knew exactly how much he was worth. It was really tough for us. From his accounts, they never physically harmed him, but he was kept in a dark room the entire time and fed sandwiches. Even got him his medication. Prayer and thinking of his family were the only things that got him through those 3 months. In the end, they caught the guy on top of the operation and they let him go. To say he was traumatized is an understatement. I've never seen a person so broken before. Couldn't even crack a smile. What's insane is that another local businessman has just recently been kidnapped as well. I wasn't kidnapped, but almost. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood. I was walking home one night when I was 12, alone. These two guys in a car called out to me holding a map and looked totally confused. I figured they needed directions and I was taught to be helpful. I got close enough to hear, which meant close enough to be grabbed. The dude started trying to pull me through the window. I freaked out. I could see duct tape and rope in the back seat and knew if I didn't get away I'd be dead. I swung my fist as hard as any 12-year-old girl possibly could, made contact, heard a crunch sound and was immediately let go of. I broke the dude's nose. I ran as fast as I could for almost 20 minutes, hiding in bushes and under people's porches just in case. I never told anyone because I was ashamed I let myself get in that situation in the first place. In hindsight, I would have found a payphone, didn't have a cell phone at 12, and called the police or told my parents. At least I got a punch in. Friend of mine was lured out of a bar and then kidnapped along with 2 other women, south of the border. Shoved into an SUV, blindfolded, brought to a house, where the 3 of them were sexually assaulted by multiple men. Some of the people involved were bloody, having just killed and dismembered someone in the room next door. She told me she could hear that guy screaming. When it was over, the general consensus of the criminals that the easiest thing to do was to just kill them because they were tired and didn't feel like driving them back to the city. One guy, one of the original guys, who had lured them, was the lone holdout to this plan, said that he still had some energy, so he would just drive them somewhere and dump them. Which he did, leaving them on a road someplace. So, basically, my friend survived on a whim of a criminal. I was coming from a party, drunk and stoned, and hailed an unlicensed cab on the street. This was before Uber and Gypsy cabs were fairly common. After I got in the car, he locked the doors and informed me he would not be taking me to my destination. Because I was intoxicated, I don't remember a lot of details, just that he was trying to kiss me. All I could think was just keep him talking. Pipe. Exaggerated my drunkenness and tried to be a drunk girl annoying as possible. He eventually kicked me out of his car near a busy intersection and I ran all the way to the subway. Do I get bonus karma? If I answer 2, ask Reddit questions in the same comment. I knew my marriage was a mistake when I finally made it home and woke my husband up to tell him what happened. He said, "Glad you're okay." Rolled over and went back to sleep. I don't know if everyone considers this kidnapping, but I do. Basically, my 15-year-old brain was pretty impressionable and maybe more sexually curious than others. This guy a year older talked to me for a while and convinced me to send a half-nude picture, I guess. He used it as blackmail to basically make me his on-demand sex worker. He would threaten to send it to my parents in multiple ways. He did this to get me to his house where he tied me up, belittled TF out of me, basically tortured me, raped me, and let me go. He then called me over and over again saying if anyone found he'd kill me. My parents were awake when I got home. They caught me sneaking out and I just came clean. He went to jail for 30 days. I'm still alive, so he hasn't killed me. But he's denied all of this and says I wanted it. Typical. Was almost kidnapped as a kid. I was on the pool deck at the high school for swim practice. I was 10 or 11 and was waiting by the locker room. A guy come out of the locker room behind me and put me in a hold, arms under my armpits and hands on the back of my head, and tried to pick me up that way and take me into the locker room, and probably the exit from there. I remember I screamed and grabbed the ladder railings with my legs and held tight. As he pulled me off of the ladder, the coaches had ran over and were questioning him and he just said, "I'm the brat's father. Leave me alone," to which the older Coach Clark immediately yelled, "Bullshit, you're not, we don't know who you are and you're attacking a child." He kept trying to leave and eventually pushed a coach to the ground and ran out. No one knew who he was, we never saw him again. I just got in and had a normal practice skeptical smiley face. I only realized this might be an attempted kidnapping years later when I was doing required training for being a teacher and went, "Oh shit, did I almost get kidnapped?" Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more Ask Reddit videos like this one.